So welcome to Democracy News Live. Today we are talking with Kabir Bedi about where has television news gone. Really, we were talking about what's happening to the world of TV news. And we said, let's talk a bit about it and understand that why news seems to have so dramatically changed. So Kabir, when you open a television set today, is it not the TV news you're expecting to see?
No, it's not, and I wonder where it's all gone. You know, when I tune in, say, to the BBC or CNN or Russian television or Al Jazeera, there is a narrative of news. This happened there, that happened there. Every country has its own preferences, its own priorities. But you get a narrative of news that's happening, whether it's the killing of children in American high schools, or whether it's the violation of ceasefires in Syria, or things that are happening across the world. Here, I don't see news on television. All I'm seeing is a bunch of talking heads discussing their views on some particularly salacious topic that's come up in the last 24 hours. And what's seen is endless discussions of the same topic on channel after channel after channel. And I'm saying, where has the news gone? This is a country of 1.2 billion people. There's so many states, there's so many events happening across the country that must be newsworthy. Where is it? All we are doing is just sensationalizing news, and it's because television news seems to be competing not with other news channels but with the general entertainment channels. So news becomes entertainment, and therefore anything that's so entertaining is seen as newsworthy, otherwise it's not there. Even what I see in the newspapers in India, at least there's a broad coverage of what's happening across the country. What I see in the newspapers in the morning is not what I see on television at night. So something is sadly missing in the whole equation of how people are deciding what is news and broadcasting what is news.
So, around the model of news, the way it's structured, right? Literally, very expensive to produce good quality news when people go out and, capture content, come back and storytell. And this is original storytelling.
Yes.
Because when you've actually seen a story yourself. I'm a journalist, I've gone out, captured a story, come back and I've narrated that.
Right.
So that being an expensive process, and the number of news channels being massive, right? The numbers are like in the hundreds and thousands. Incapable of actually delivering that news, which means the same content packaged like general entertainment because they're competing for it. So,
yes, it's partly a question of cost. They don't want to actually have the cost of putting people on the ground, reporting stories on the ground of mandis where farmers are getting ripped off, of hospitals where patients are getting ill-treated and dying for lack of medicines and lack of doctors. These are not the stories that are being covered. What is being covered is what some socialite said about some other socialite that becomes scandalous in some way, something that's politically incorrect, and therefore it's discussed ad nauseum, channel after channel. Your television screen is nothing more than blocks of people talking about the same topic night after night. The same pattern is followed, even though the topic might change, but the pattern remains the same.
and it's about the same people as well.
Very often the same people called as commentators. And my point is, where is the news on television? If television sees itself in competition with general entertainment channels, then there is no hope of getting any news, because it's just a question of what gets the TRPs up. Then they are abdicating a responsibility of telling a nation what is happening to them, around them. I mean, in China, Xi Jinping says, I'm going to be president for life. Is it on the news? I don't see it. Is it important to us? Of course it is. China is India's biggest rival, biggest neighbor. Everything that happens there will deeply affect us, deeply affect the world. We don't have a word of it on our television news. So my point is, who is deciding and prioritizing what is the news, and why is it being allowed to just become a matter like a gossip discussion?
Right. One of the big challenges I think news has always faced, and it was local news in the West. For example, in the 80s, a lot of local television stations would follow a car that was being chased by police, and they looked at it and I said, I spent $1,500 in chasing this car. It brings me numbers which are so much higher. And so they said crime is going to be our focus, and that is what's going to make us money.
Right.
But it was not the national network broadcasters who would still
Right.
talk about issues of
Right.
interest. But what seems to have happened here is, taking that lowest common denominator, and then the national network channels then targeting the smallest possible group, which means the least amount of money being spent, not even a helicopter to chase that car. They actually spend it on 5 people with 5,000 rupees each and in a studio chair and then talking again and again.
Right, right.
Do you see a way to break out of this? If somebody gave you the charge, Kabir, you are responsible for breaking the cycle, what would you do?
I would first turn to the state broadcaster and say you have a social duty to report the news, irrespective of whether you get TRPs or not, so that those people that are genuinely interested in the news can get a narrative, a vision, and information of what is actually happening on the ground, good, bad, and indifferent. And sometimes I also mourn the lack of good news. If something good is happening, that should also be part of news. But assuming that bad news is good news, as the saying goes, even by that score, there must be a mandate to a network saying your job is to create news, like the BBC. BBC is a perfect example of where the state said, we will create a license fee for people watching TV. That money will go to the BBC, whose remit it is to give the best of news and to give the best of drama, whether it is popular or not. And I think that is where I would start. I saw this on WION, which you started, that had an actual narrative. It still does, because they've still kept your format. And you get a story after story that is happening. That is a news story. So if I want to know what's happening on a news front, I turn to WION today. So from the India point of view, abroad, mind you, a lot of people are now getting their news off the internet, and this trend will be accelerated, because those that really want news and will not find it on TV will be driven to get it off the internet. Whereas it is far more interesting if I could get it on TV with the right visuals, with the right cameraman in the right place covering the right story. And even we just have lost our sensitivity. If there's a flood that happened that displaces 3 million people, is it on news? No, it is not. Whereas a river flooding in Europe or mine disaster in China, that might get some play, but not disasters that happen in our own country. So there has to be, I think, a real introspection on the part of the people that are part of the media industry as to what constitutes news and how can this news be broadcast in a way that is meaningful to those that are interested in news.
Sure. The Indian government is trying to bring, I think, some sound of change. The broadcaster today spends 4,400 crores every year to create this great drama and content and news. They have the money for it. They lose 2,200 crores.
Yes.
But they're still not able to reach there. But I think there has to be an effort of a good, solid public broadcaster. And the good, solid public broadcaster is what actually lands up saving the day for many countries in the world.
That's true. And hopefully, beyond the public broadcaster, there will also be private broadcasters that have a conscience that say, no, we will broadcast news. It may be a loss-leading channel. It may be part of a boutique of channels they have, where they make lots of money on entertainment, lots of money on music, lots of money on sport, and say, even if it makes a loss, we will put out news as we think it should be put out. So I don't want to bank exclusively on the government. Sure. I do believe there are enough people with a conscience in this country that will find ways of broadcasting news in the way it should be broadcast. But right now, a lot of them seem to be caught up in the rat race of the TRP race and doing things that just are sensational and frothy and frivolous, in the interest of keeping the viewer hooked to their channel.
Great. Thank you, Kabir. And
Thank
hopefully
you.
we will actually see news coming out in the next few years again. Until then, enjoy the channels you enjoy.
We need more people like Rohit.
Thank you.